Hey, welcome everyone to another edition of Sippin' Ground Coffee. My name's Dan Painter. I'll be hosting today's live stream. We cover a myriad of different topics on these broadcasts. Today we're going to talk about the Commander 2 and 3 variable frequency drives. But before we get into that, just a couple of reminders. If you are getting anything out of these videos that we're putting out, please hit that like and subscribe button or that little bell there on your YouTube channel so that you can get notifications every time we do one of these live broadcasts. Be sure to follow us also on Facebook and LinkedIn. And then also, this is something that I'd strongly encourage if you haven't done this yet, but go to our website and sign up for our newsletter that typically comes out about every quarter. And so make sure you sign up for that. The other thing, and we've been doing this consistently with these live streams, is I'm going to have a code word for today's broadcast. And when we get to that, make sure you write that down. And if you email 3 different code words into our marketing department, that would be marketing@flintandwalling.com. Email 3 of those in. Renee, you mentioned the other day we have decided somewhat what we're going to give these folks, yes? So I can't remember what that was.
So we have a tour and training t-shirt, specifically only for anybody that takes a training course at Flint and Walling. So we give that to them, and then a couple other goodies that they have to wait and see what they get.
All right, cool. That's awesome. So anyway, there'll be that code word that will be out somewhere in this broadcast. With that said, let's go ahead and get started with this Commander 2 and 3 variable frequency drive. On the way in this morning, I happened to be thinking, one of the things I thought about was old Henry Ford, That old boy was pretty good at manufacturing, and one of the things that was very, very innovative is that old Model T. One of the things that drove that is Henry Ford decided to make a vehicle that was affordable. And when he did that, that Model T became, the largest selling vehicle in the country. And so, in many respects, that's been the driving force behind this Commander 2 and 3. We have a whole family of variable frequency drives, sometimes referred to simply as VFDs. Also, I've heard the term variable speed controllers. But again, we have a whole family of these available today for all different types of applications. Submersible pump motors, centrifugal pump motors. And Commander 2 and 3 are going to be our most recent additions to that family. And so with that, let me just, what I'd like to do today is just cover a few features of this drive. We'll briefly talk about how to install it, which is very, very simple. If you've ever installed a control box on a 3-wire pump motor, you pretty much can install a drive. And then I'm going to go through some of the setup and programming that this drive affords us. So with that, we'll start on the outside, okay? First of all, this is a NEMA 3R enclosure. That means it is applicable for both indoor and outdoor applications. This NEMA 3R enclosure will protect the internals from rain, sleet, snow, anything else that might fall from the sky. And really, the only difference between a NEMA 3R and a NEMA 4, and I get asked this every once in a while, a NEMA 4 is going to also protect internals from rain, sleet, snow, and ice, but it'll take a direct water spray as well, like a fire hose, right? NEMA 3R is not designed for that, but it is designed for everything else that we're going to see in the environment outside. This drive has 4 external mounting brackets located 2 at the top, 2 at the bottom. Again, they're external from the drive. And then what a lot of contractors have liked, at least I've heard comment to this regard, that instead of having a cover that is removable, this one's going to be hinged. I'm going to open this up here in a minute. There's a couple of latches over here on the right-hand side, very easy to open this up and access the inside. You can also padlock this should you desire to do that. So there's a place over here to put a padlock. But very robust hinge door to be able to access the inside of that. There are also 3, there's a 3-light interface on the front of this drive right up here at the top. There's 3 lights up there. Basically what that's going to do on the cover, that's going to give us an indication of the power, the status, and then any type of trip that this drive may see. It'll indicate that also on the front side of this drive. So that green light, the first one, is the power light. That'll be a solid green. When it's illuminated, that'll be a solid green. That's just going to indicate that you've got the controller powered up. The next light, which is referred to as the status light, I think everybody can probably see that. That's located right there. That light can be solid or blinking. So, and dependent on whether that's solid or blinking, that's going to give us the indication or the status of this drive. And then the last one over here on the far right is what's called that's the trip. Okay, so that's again, that's going to be a light that's either solid or blinking, and based on what that's doing, is also going to give us an indication of what this drive or why this drive may have tripped out. But again, this drive was designed primarily for affordability, and these things they ought to be really flying off the shelf, because not only are they affordable, but I think you're going to see here in just the next few minutes how simple this drive is as well. But what this drive's going to do, even though it's in that affordability range, it's going to give you constant pressure, or sometimes referred to as consistent pressure. Some people even refer to it as city water type pressure. It's going to give you that, but it's also going to give you the protection and onboard diagnostics that you would expect to have out of a variable frequency drive. So with that, I think I'm going to go ahead and we're going to open up the inside of this this enclosure, and I think at this point, Renee, I'm going to probably have to refer to a slide or two. So I'm going to go ahead and open this up, all right? And one of the things that you're going to see on the production drives, I'm going to flip to this first slide here, is this label, all right? This label will be affixed right inside this front cover, all right? So this label is going to indicate those lights that we talked about up front, particularly the status and the trip lights, because those two lights can either be solid or blinking. And so when we look at that label, on there's really everything we're going to need to know based on the status lights itself. Let me try to clarify this just a second. When they're blinking, all right, particularly the red one, which is your trip light, when it's blinking, it's going to blink in sequence, right? It's either a sequential of 2 blinks or 3 blinks or 4 or 5 blinks, but they're going to be sequential. And inside this cover is that chart, and that chart's got the diagnostics on it, and so you look at the number of blinks that light's given you, and then you reference that over here on this chart, all right? And that'll indicate, and you can see up there, I hope you can maybe see this on your screen, but you can see that this will indicate an underload or a under voltage, a trip locked rotor, so on and so forth, okay? But that chart's going to be, again, right on the inside cover of the drive. All right, now, when we look at wiring this drive, from a standpoint of installation, you're going to bring your pump cable and your power cable in through the bottom ports of the drive, all right? And then if you look at the drive, I got both pictures here, all right? There's this terminal block here, all right? That's where this is going to go to, this is where your pump cable is going to be going out to the pump and motor. Your power coming in will be over here on this left-hand side. These terminal blocks are very, very well labeled. L1, L2, and the ground. Again, this is where your power will hook up. And then over here is where you're going to take the cables out to the pump motor itself. Now, there is slight differences between the Commander 2 and the Commander 3. The Commander 2 is designed for 2-wire motors, all right? And really, this will virtually run anybody's 2-wire motor. Whereas the Commander 3 is going to be designed for 3-wire motors, and so very, very easy to differentiate those two. Now, there's some subtle differences between these two drives, particularly on the inside here, all right? So, for example, the Commander 3, you're going to have four terminals over here. You're going to have your red, yellow, black, and your ground. So you'll have 4 terminals over here to run out to your pump motor. If this were, in fact, a Commander 2, then in that case, You only have 3 terminals over there because, again, with a 2-wire motor, you've got 2 black leads and a green ground. And so that would be one of the differences between the Commander 2 and the Commander 3. And let's see what else I might have. Okay, so that's just the difference between the 2-wire and the 3-wire motor. I'm not real sure what slide I might have coming up next. Okay, we'll go inside this box, all right? We'll go inside the box. I want to point out a couple other terminal blocks here. One's right here in the middle, all right? This terminal block here. 2 of those 4 terminals are already going to be pre-wired. You can see that on the left-hand side, this little red and black cable wire here. Those are pre-wired at the factory. What that's going to do is that's going to run down to the cooling fan that's located down at the bottom of the drive. Again, that's going to be pre-wired. These other 2 terminals is where you're going to be wiring in whatever type of device we're going to use to run this drive, be it a switch or a transducer. All right, those will get wired right in here, and I'm going to circle back on both those here in a bit. Right there. The other thing that I would point out about the drive is up here at the top is a USB port, and this is really a great idea, concept, so that this drive can be it can be updated remotely in the field with just a flash stick. All right, so right there is the USB port where that would go. All right, so the only other thing on the inside of the drive is this bank of, there's a bank of dip switches over here on the left-hand side. There's 3 banks, okay? SW1, SW2, and SW3, all right? So switch bank 1, switch bank 2, switch bank 3, 3 dip switches. Let me clarify these 3 banks real easy for us, all right? That first bank, this bank up here, that has only to do with the pump motor, right? That's all it has to do with is the pump motor, period. That second bank, SW2, that's got to do with what are we going to use to turn that pump motor on. We talked about that briefly a second or 2 ago, whether it's going to be a switch or a transducer. And then that bank 3 down there, that's your catch-all, that's kind of your fine-tuning. Again, we'll cover some of that as we get there. And then over on the right-hand side of the drive, is the underload dial, and then the pressure dials there. Okay, I'll circle back on both of those. So underload up here at the top, and here's where we're going to set the pressure down here at the bottom. All right. So again, that's pretty much the basic inside of this drive. Let's look at some of these banks, though. All right. Let's see if I pull another slide up here. Once what we got coming up. Let's go to bank 1. All right, bank 1. All right, on bank 1, if this were in fact I'm looking at the slide here because I've got a 3-wire drive here on the table, but the slide that's up on yep, that is for a 3-wire. That would be for a 3-wire pump. So you can look at that SW1. All right, you've got your horsepower listed up there. That'll go from half to a 2 horsepower on a 3-wire motor. That will go from a half to a 2 horsepower. Then just below that, those first 5 dip switches, position number 6 there. Position number 6 is going to indicate whether we're going to run a submersible pump or a centrifugal pump, all right? So let's just run on the premise that we're going to run a submersible pump motor with this. Let's just also run on the premise that we're going to select, I don't care, a horse and a half or 2. We're going to have to move one of these from the off position to the on position depending upon what horsepower we're going to pick, and we're going to leave position 6 right where it's at because it's going to indicate that it's a submersible pump that we'll be running. Just below that position 6 into position 7, and this is again only specific to 3-wire motors and the Commander 3 itself, is your difference between just a standard 3-wire single-phase motor, or are we running a 3-wire 3-phase motor? So again, it's just a matter of moving the switches to the proper position so that the drive knows what type of motor, what horsepower, what phase that we're going to be operating in. All right, so that's the bank up there at the top. Now here's the differences between the Commander 2 and the Commander 3. All right. That Commander 3 on the left-hand side of your screen, that's the one we just talked about, where you've got your horsepower listed at the top, And then you've got a choice between a submersible and a centrifugal, 3-phase or 3-wire. If you move to the right, this is going to be on a Commander 2. All right, this is a 2-wire motor drive. And if you look, this is only going to go to 1.5 horses. Because that's where we stop with 2-wire motors. So again, if this were a submersible pump, you would select your horsepower up here based on the 2-wire drive. You select your horsepower. Once again, that position, in this case, that position 6. If this is a submersible pump, there's nothing you're going to have to do with that. We're going to move that when we get back to a centrifugal motor. I'll circle back on that a second. But position 7, once again, we're selecting between a submersible pump or a centrifugal pump. And then again, with the 2-wire drive, the 2-wire drive motors, particularly in that 1/2 horsepower, all right? And this is the only one where you would have a choice between 115 volt and 230. So I'm going to guess the majority of the time that's going to be a 230 volt model, but with the exception of the occasional 1/2 horse that may be 115 volt. But those are the primary differences up there at Bank 1 between those two types of drives, right? If, in fact, I'm going to come back here. If, in fact, we're running a centrifugal motor, all right? Flint & Walling manufactures centrifugal motors just as well as we do with submersible motors. In fact, when a little anecdotal story here real quick. If you have a chance this fall, this winter that we'll be approaching, to come to our factory, I'd love nothing more than to walk you through that factory and give you a tour there, because one of the things that you're going to experience that you won't at any other pump company is you're going to get to see not just the pumps that you install manufacturers, you're going to get to see these motors manufactured as well. Not just submersible motors, but centrifugal motors. And the little plug that I would put in there for centrifugal motors is that Flint & Walling is the only pump company, certainly in North America, that manufactures their own centrifugal motors, all right? We're the only pump company that does that. So that all said, everybody else that's going to use a centrifugal pump's using some sourced motor. You know, there's other brands out there of motors, and they're going to choose one of them, and they're going to select one of those motors. So any time that we go to a centrifugal, all right? So if if in fact on the Commander 3, if that position 6 was moved over, so that it indicates the centrifugal's using, and position 7 over there on the Commander 2, if it were moved over where a centrifugal motor is being used, then what we're going to do in the case of centrifugal motors, above ground pumps, surface pumps, forget the horsepower that's up there at the top, forget all that, because we are going to go with what's called max motor amps. All right, max motor amps. Again, these pump companies, they don't manufacture their own motors, and they're using somebody's. And so one of the ways that we're going to determine and let this drive know what type of motor, centrifugal motor it's operating, is we're going to go to this chart that will indicate where we're going to select for max motor amps. Now, that label, and I forgot, but that label that's the inside cover that we talked about early on, we don't need to go back to that, but that label, one thing I want to bring up is it's got a QR code on it. I should have mentioned it then. If you scan that thing with your phone, you're going to come right to the instruction manual, and here's where we're going to find some of these charts. So, for instance, if you look at that Commander 3 chart there, all right, come down to what, 6.2 max amps. I don't know, what would that be, 1.5 horse maybe motor? But you come down to that 6.2 max amps, and right there, if you go across, it's going to tell you that position 1, I'm trying to read this from a distance, position 1 is going to be in the off position, position 2 is going to be in the on position, and then you go across and you know how to set those dip switches up based on max motor amps. And same thing with the Commander 2. So basically, if it's a submersible motor, we'll go ahead and set it based on horsepower. However, if it's going to be a centrifugal motor, we're going to base that on max motor amps. And that's also where you're going to see that PSC label on that. You'll see where the PSC label's on. That stands for permanent split capacitor. So this will also operate a centrifugal motor with a permanent split capacitor in it. Okay, we're going to move down to bank number 2. Now, bank number 2 is basically got to do with how we're going to power or operate this drive. It's either going to operate off of a pressure switch or a transducer. As you can see up there at the top, there's your choices. All right, pressure switch or pressure transducer. Now, I'm going to, here's that bank kind of in a close-up mode there. But again, you know, when you're setting this drive up, you're going to set it up for what motor you're running. Submersible based on horsepower, centrifugal based on max amps. Then you're going to come down to this bank and you're going to choose either a transducer or a pressure switch, right? Either one. Because this drive will operate with either one. Those positions 2, 3, and 4 all have to do with response time. And again, not very often would these need to be changed from where they're going to be set at when it leaves the factory. But this is where we can actually increase the response time, whether it's a transducer or a switch. We can speed it up or slow it down. That drawdown, you can see that's up to 20%. That's basically how much below the pressure point are we going to want that to drop before the drive kicks on. So it's going to leave the factory at a factory setting of 5% below what pressure we're going to set. But you can move it all the way up to 20%. All right, this next slide, let's see what we got here. All right, so here's our transducer and our pressure switch, okay? Now, I'm going to move my head just out of the way a little bit. So here we go. So with the Commander 2, right, that's a 2-wire drive right there. Based on the model number, CMD, Commander Drive 2, if you go with a suffix of a -T, we'll ship that drive with a 100-pound pressure transducer. If you, on the other hand, put a S suffix at the end of that model number, then we'll ship that drive with a pressure switch. And those two are indicated up there at the top of this slide. The same thing with the Commander 3 drive, all right? So based on your suffix is going to be dependent on whether you want that drive shipped with the switch or with the pressure transducer. Now, when we were into this drive, and I showed you this middle port here, and I said that 2 of those 4 run down to the fan, and it left us these other 2 for whatever device we're going to use to turn this drive on and off. So again, when we wire, if in fact this is a transducer, so we don't want to keep any of this a secret. If this is a transducer, what you're going to do is it's going to have 2 wires come off of it, a brown and a blue. And what we're going to do is we're going to hook the brown to that number 1 S1 terminal, and we're going to hook the blue to the one next to it, that S2. It's very, very simple to do if we follow the instructions, all right? So that's really, again, installing this drive, there's no magic to that. It's just a matter of wiring, and everything's well labeled and well marked. If you're going to use that pressure switch over there on the right-hand side, that's going to have 2 wires come off of it. One's red, one's black, and it doesn't matter which one you put those on. It doesn't matter. They're interchangeable. So what you're going to do is take the red and black off the switch, and you're going to hook them up to the S1, S2. And in that fast, we're already hooked up to the switch and or the transducer either way. All right, either way. Now, let's see what this next slide is going to tell us. All right, this next slide, yes, okay. So this next slide gets down to kind of this catch-all down here at the bottom, okay? So down here at the bottom is again, most of these things down here at the bottom would be needed only if there were the case where we want to fine tune or maybe tweak this thing. You've got a broken pipe down there that you can turn on and off. As far as protection goes, if you're installing this drive, and you're upgrading a conventional system, and they've already got a pressure tank that's installed. I don't know, maybe it's a 40-gallon pressure tank or whatever that might be. You can keep that pressure tank and still make this drive operate. So if if it's a new install, a brand new install, a drive doesn't need the size of a pressure tank that a conventional water system would need, running off of a 20-pound pressure switch. So a drive, a lot of these drives are installed with tanks really not much bigger than a basketball. But therein lies your choice there between a large tank and a small tank. We're going to get to a key word over here, right? Those two dials over there on the right, the top one is your underload, and the bottom one is your pressure. Now, here's your key word for the day. It's called set point, right? It's all one word, set point. So you want to jot that down somewhere, and again, email that up to us here at marketing at Flint & Walling. We'll give you credit for today's session. And then when you get 3 credits, as Renee mentioned early on, there's some awards that will be headed your way. But again, that bottom bank there is, there's times where this drive will be installed and nothing on that bottom bank will ever need to change at all. So it's very, there's the occasion where we would, but majority of the time not. And in that second bank, really, you're choosing a transducer or a switch. And by the way, this drive, if you don't tell it what it's got, it'll figure it out. It'll determine whether it's got a transducer or a switch involved. Now, I'll tell you something, and this is I'm just sharing some opinions that I've heard over the years from contractors as it pertains to transducers and switches, all right? A lot of them have a tendency to prefer a transducer. And one of the reasons is it's easier to set that pressure set point. I'm going to back up to this one slide I think I had, Renee, where I actually showed this there, that pressure switch on the right-hand side. All right, look, if you're going to set the pressure, whatever pressure you want to keep as your so-called constant pressure, and you've got a pressure switch, the way you're going to do it is that black portion on the top side of that pressure switch is kind of like a rubber boot. You can pop that off of there. And when you do, there'll be a plastic tower inside of that switch with like a hex nut down in the center of it. So you'll go kind of like a standard conventional pressure switch. You'll go down on that nut with a nut driver, and you're going to turn it clockwise to increase pressure, counterclockwise to decrease pressure. Again, very similar to a conventional pressure switch. With this one, I believe a quarter turn is going to get you about a 3-pound increase, all right? So about a quarter turn on that will get you a 3-pound increase. Probably going to want to have a pressure gauge nearby, and hopefully one that's accurate, so that you can look at that pressure gauge while you're turning that hex nut that's in there, and so that you can go ahead and set your pressure to whatever pressure you want. Whereas with that dial down here in the bottom right-hand side, all right, where that pressure set point's at, that's basically, that's why a contractor tends to like this. They said, man, this is so much easier to set the pressure because, and I don't have to look at a gauge. I just open the enclosure up, and I can just, with that dial, choose my pressure set point. Now, I do want to talk about this pressure set point here real quick, all right? I want to talk about this pressure set point. All right, so that's particularly if this is being used with a pressure transducer, all right? I'm going to read this to you. It says, the knob is factory set to 50% of the transducer range. Stop. Transducer range, what did I tell you that was? Well, a few minutes ago, I told you that was a 100-pound transducer that we ship out of here standard with this drive, all right? So it's set at 50% of that range. 50% of that would be right at 50 PSI. If it's a 100-pound transducer, it's going to be set at 50 PSI. But this is adjustable. You can adjust it from 10 to 90% of that range. Again, this is of the range of that transducer. So that's 10 to 90% of that 100-pound transducer. What did that just say? You can go from 10 PSI to 90 PSI, and you can do that in 5 PSI increments. Now that's, again, it's for a 100-pound transducer. When you go to, if you have the application where you're using a 150 or a 200 or a 300-pound transducer, this same logic applies. However, those numbers are going to change because 50% of 150 is 75, right? So anyway, that's keep that in mind. The pressure set point must be adjusted when the drive is powered off, and then that new setting will take effect once you power it back up again. All right. So again, this knob is compatible with a 4 to 20 milliamp pressure transducer, which is pretty standard in the industry. Pressure transducer must be installed in the system, and dip switch SW2, position 1 must be, I'm not sure what that XDR, in the right position, all right? That dip switch 2 on that 2-wire drive. I think we're getting down, okay, this last one is the underload, and I'm just going to read another couple paragraphs here because it's easier. I think it's more of a cleaner explanation, but this underload sensitivity that's up here, all right? The commander drives are figured at factory to ensure detection of underload faults in a wide variety of applications. At times, this trip level may result in unnecessary faults and require small adjustments. So if you're getting nuisance trips, all right, if it's a nuisance trip, we can cure that, again, by backing off that sensitivity. Down here it says shallow set. If the pump is installed in an extremely shallow or an artesian well, and the controller trips on an underload fault, the underload potentiometer will need to be turned counterclockwise to drop that sensitivity setting, and then to get my head out, I check operation of the system and repeat as necessary. So again, whoops, I just lost the camera.
You're good.
Well, I guess it tells me we're getting close to the end of this broadcast here. The last one is deep set up there. In cases where we have deep set pumps, and boy, Flint Walling does a fantastic job with those deep set pumps. But there you can see that run the system at open discharge to the pump to pump the well down properly. If the system does not trip as it should, the underload potentiometer will need to be adjusted clockwise to increase that sensitivity, and then check the operation again as necessary. So again, this drive, it's got the protection you need, it's got the diagnostics through the blinks, and it's a simple drive to program, it's a simple drive to install, and most importantly, it's affordable, very, very affordable. So don't keep this a secret. Get with your sales guys or people and order these are little pocket manuals. There's all kinds of literature available for this new Commander 2 and Commander 3 drive, so get a hold of some of this stuff. Most of what we talked about today is going to be in some of these publications here. But again, if you haven't tried this drive, you really need to just give it a shot. These things are, in certain geographic areas, these things have really taken off, and they've taken off for the same reason I've said now, this is probably the third or fourth time: simplicity and affordability. So with that, I think we've probably reached about 30 minutes maybe or so in there. Are there any questions that come in today on this thing at all? That clear, huh? Was that clear? All right, well, listen, I appreciate you joining and invite you to come back. We've got more topics yet coming, so hit that like button and that subscribe button, and you'll know exactly when we're doing this next. So with that, I bid you farewell. Have a great day and a great rest of your week. Thank you.